So I'm going to explain. They're real Al-Qaeda, real ISIS, and they're not controlled by the West. They are, it's like turning a vicious, rabid pit bull loose with small children. The pit bull's under your control. You just release it in to attack. And that's what's going on here. And the CFR writes about it every month. They don't even, I remember the headline 2 years ago, why we need Al-Qaeda in Syria and how great they are. And then finally, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz came out and said we're not Al-Qaeda's Air Force in Syria. And the military, holding up Infowars.com signs, that's where it started, with hashtags, said, I will not fight for Al-Qaeda in Syria. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs went on the Friday night before the strike was set and said, you have to stand down. We can't do this. And then it came out the British, SAS and others, did train, as we told you 2 years ago, Al-Qaeda forces and ISIS forces. They know you know it's Al-Qaeda, so they just change it to ISIS, folks, to confuse you. And now they've had a bunch of the Wahhabists even come out in Saudi Arabia and say these people are being run by the West. So that's now in major Riyadh newspapers. It's in Israeli papers. And then Netanyahu came out a month ago and said, we need ISIS. They're doing a good job. Because it got exposed that in northern Israel by Lebanon and then bordering Syria, that Israeli forces are coordinating with ISIS. And people then send me emails saying, why are you anti-Israel? Man, you're mentally ill if you think that I'm going to sign on to backing Al-Qaeda blowing up churches or blowing up moderate Muslims and putting burqas on women's heads, okay? And sexually mutilating people, okay? I'm not anti-Israel. But our country, Israel, all of them, the decisions have been made to back Al-Qaeda worldwide. And that's incredibly immoral. And what does it say about us if we just let them ignore this and let this keep going on? Our military's not ignoring it. They're freaked out, and they should be. Terrorism has been used to end our way of life and bring in tyranny. And now they say the Tea Party's the main enemy. And gun owners and returning veterans and Christians. That's on record. Don't you see it? The border's wide open. It's all a fraud. We are now the enemy because the globalists are literally occupiers. We get that message out, we can stop them. So we salute Syrian Girl, twitter.com/partisan girl, youtube.com, Syrian Girl Partisan, and she joins us. So Mimi, great to have you on with us from Australia. Thanks for getting up at 4 in the morning or whatever it is. What time is it in Australia?
At the moment, it's about getting towards 3 a.m., I think. And thanks so much for having me on again. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be on.
Well, it's an honor to have you. Okay, well, I mean, you've heard me for 5 minutes talking about my view. What's your take? Where do you want to start in the world?
Well, I would love to go straight into ISIS, if that's okay, and then we can get on to the other things, because I just want to basically support and reiterate a lot of what you've just said. Just recently, ISIS has actually pushed out all of the Christians from Mosul in Iraq, which they've been there for 2,000 years, and they've actually been marking their homes just like the Nazis would have marked the homes of Jewish people in Germany just before and during World War II. So they've been, of course, destroying Iraq's historical artifacts and following on the trend of the destruction of Iraq's history since the start of the war in 2003. They've been stoning women, and basically their goal is to turn back time to 1,400 years ago. So a British person of Pakistani descent, who is born in Britain and lived there all his life, because he happens to be of this specific sect of Wahhabi Islam, he believes himself more entitled to Syrian land than a Syrian Christian or a Syrian Muslim that's been living there for his entire life. So they believe that anything that is Muslim land, that has a majority of Muslims living in it, no matter if those Muslims agree with their brand of Wahhabism or not, Wahhabism is a specific cult that Al-Qaeda follow, they believe that land automatically belongs to them, and they're allowed to just go in there, steal people's homes, steal people's oil, slaughter people, not give anything to society, but just create war and destruction. And it's basically like a zombie horde. I'd love to talk about who is backing them and basically how the media plays a role in all this as well.
Sure. I mean, they're playing dumb. Like, we don't know where ISIS came from. Well, it came from the bases they've set up there in eastern Syria in the last couple years. And they've been given all these weapons, and that's what they're there for. But, yeah, let's talk about some of these people who are blowing up churches, lining up Christians and non-radical Muslims, including Sunnis. Again, Wahhabism, for folks that don't know, is a tiny minority of the majority Islam, I guess about 80%, that are Sunnis. And, of course, you're a Sunni as well. And it's just amazing that they're now even killing other Sunnis they don't like and eating hearts and just... And I've talked to a lot of military people and family. They just say Wahhabists are like crazed demons. They're not Muslims. I mean, they rape women, rape men, kill babies. They just are a bunch of psycho supremacists, like you said. They think they're God.
Well, exactly. They really believe that they are backed by God. And the media has been sort of helping in this because they're giving them an air of invincibility. And they're sort of muddying the waters about where their support is coming from. They're making them appear as though nobody's supporting them. So some brainwashed youth in the West will start to think, oh, maybe God is the one who is making ISIS so strong. You know, perhaps... You know, they start to believe in this myth that's being created. And, you know, ISIS, in fact, formed in Iraq in 2006, around 2006, 2007. And one of its leaders actually admitted when he was captured that the group solely existed on the internet. And yet, even while this is happening, it was given so much attention by Al Jazeera. The thing is, Al-Qaeda was never in Iraq in 2003, even though Bush was claiming that it was. It came to Iraq much later, as I said, in 2006. So it just goes to show you that if Syria and Iraq, the countries, were not destabilized, these groups would never have been formed, have grown as they have. You know, they used to be largely a myth, and now they become a reality. I think the purpose of ISIS in Iraq was mainly to create a division between Shias and Sunnis, because in 2004, if you recall, many people were protesting against the occupation that were both Sunni and Shia, and the country was sort of united against the occupation. And in order to divide and conquer them, of course, the thinkers of the time, such as James Steele, Robert Ford, who created the El Salvador option, I'm forgetting a lot of names here. They decided to back death squads from both the Shia side and the Sunni side. So on the Shia side of the coin, they supported the Badr brigades, which were supported by Iran and created by Iran during the Iran-Iraq war. And they actually put them into the Interior Ministry of Iraq and created this very sectarian government and military. And on the other side of that coin, they created ISIS, which is, of course, sees all Shiites as basically lambs to the slaughter.
Just like Israel created Hamas to counter Hezbollah in 1974 or 5. This is full spectrum dominance, for those that don't understand, where you create the two groups to wreck the country. The target is the women and children. The target is civilization. The target is movie theaters. The target is running water. The target is eugenics. And that's what this is. And that's why these are absolutely war crimes by the Rand Corporation and the Pentagon.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done has been right.
Realize that we can defeat this together. Just like we stopped the air war that would have toppled the regime there to turn it over to Al-Qaeda to blow up every church and murder every Muslim that wasn't a Wahhabist. You're wearing a suit and tie and don't have a big beard, you're dead. You haven't attacked anybody and want to work with people, you're dead. You run around like psychos that want to kill people all day and go from country to country, you're going to be put in charge. I mean, this is so evil. It's chaos, just like they want our borders open. Just like they want to teach kids 2 + 2 = 5 and cut our power plants off and ship our jobs overseas. This country is under attack. The whole world is by the globalists. They're attacking everybody. They're cutting our troops off of their VA benefits, putting them on death lists. Syrian girl joins us again with her inside perspective. Mimi, continuing here with where you left off, how are things going from your family that you talked to back in Syria in the war. I mean, I know they've been forced to do a lot of setbacks, and militarily, if you're losing one conflict to boost morale and keep momentum going, a lot of times you'll then try to invade something else. I think that's a big part of this move into Iraq as well. Saudi Arabia has been trying to act like they're not involved, but they're involved on record. So what's your intel on that?
Well, from what's left of my family in Syria, they're residing in Damascus, and they actually told me that the situation in Damascus is getting much better. The checkpoints are no longer very close to the city. They're moving out into the outskirts. But on the other hand, in Aleppo, I have a friend in Aleppo, and he tells me that in that city of 2 million people, they've been without running water for 2 months, because the Al-Qaeda rebels actually blew up the water supply. And this isn't ISIS, this is Jabhat al-Nusra, the other Al-Qaeda rebels that the moderate rebels that they keep telling us about seem to be working alongside, and so they're just conveniently forgotten about in the media. So yeah, they've actually been without running water. They can't take showers, they can't flush the toilet, they can't open their, make a cup of tea or anything. So they've been taking it out of rivers and just dragging them back to their homes. And you never hear about that from the humanitarians. But I just wanted to go back to Hamas just for a little bit because of what's going on in Gaza and what you mentioned about its creation. I just wanted to say, yes, they were created to weaken other groups which were based on nationalism and secularism rather than religion. But perhaps maybe Hamas just wasn't sectarian enough, because in 2001, the Mossad actually was caught trying to start an Al-Qaeda cell in Gaza. So that's really interesting. And it's also interesting that it was ISIS that claimed to have captured the 3 illegal Israeli settlers, not Hamas. Hamas actually said they had nothing to do with it. And that was the event that was the precursor to Israel starting to bomb Gaza. So it's interesting how ISIS has been tying in to that plan. And one of the other plans that ISIS has really been tying into is the Balkanization of Iraq and Syria, into each country being split into 3 separate states, which has been one of the main goals of a lot of these think tanks, such as the Brookings Institute, that suggested this would be really beneficial towards the US and Israel. And of course, that means the creation of Kurdistan, supporting the Peshmerga there.
Yeah, let's be clear. At Harvard, the Chicago Business School, the Pentagon, Rand Corporation, all these big think tanks are bragging about how great this is going. I wonder how everybody in Israel deals with Netanyahu openly endorsing ISIS a month ago and saying, what's going on in Iraq is good for us. Good for us. I mean, how is joining with evil, causing civil war, killing innocent people, how is that good for Israel? I mean, I can see the geopolitical things for now, but how is losing the moral high ground, how is doing that good for Israel?
Well, they just want more land, I guess it's like, or they just want to continue their ethnic cleansing of all of the Palestinians that live amongst them. So that's the agenda. I don't think it's good for Jewish people. I think that it's good for only the state that wants to grow. I mean, the state has a mind of its own. It doesn't care about...
Exactly. That's why all these governments act just the same. Just like our state wants a war with Russia, but we don't. It's the state and people like George Soros in it that just get power out of chaos and out of a permanent crisis government, a COG. Please remember that this hour is brought to you by the best storable food out there, mypatriotsupply.com/Alex. And I love the big plastic tote boxes, storage boxes that it comes in, super high quality. It's what I use for myself and my family, non-GMO, mypatriotsupply.com/Alex. In these times, you're nuts if you don't have a good supply of storable food. 866-229-0927, My Patriot Supply. Mimi, finishing up with where you see all this going, and why do you think suddenly Obama doesn't care if people know that our government runs Al-Qaeda? How can Benjamin Netanyahu say we got to attack this country or Gaza, this area, this enclave, because ISIS killed 3 of our teenagers, but then be in the Jerusalem Post saying what ISIS is doing is good for Israel and Iraq and Iran? It's just such moral bankruptcy publicly, and then it's moral high ground. If I'm not for Al-Qaeda, I'm now anti-Israel. It's very bizarre.
It's because they count on the fact that they can keep people asleep and dumbed down with all their stupid shows that they put on for them. And basically they muddy the waters, you know. On one hand, they tell you, they try to spread rumors like, oh, Israel's neutral, or Israel actually supports Assad, when in reality they're actually helping the rebels, giving them medical aid and giving them shelter on the border. And these are Al-Qaeda that they're sheltering. You know, it's obvious for people who are paying attention, but they're counting on the fact that nobody's paying attention.
Other points you'd like to get out on air before we go to calls, and I want to get your take on Ukraine.
Other points on ISIS, I suppose, I wanted to really make the point that when Obama said he wanted to give $500 million to strengthen the moderate rebels, what he really was trying to say is, I want to give $500 million to ISIS, because he himself said just a week previously that the idea of a moderate-ready rebel force in Syria is a fantasy. And even the head of the moderates, Jamal Mar'ouf, this is the guy that the US says is the beacon of hope, said on record to The Independent that Al-Qaeda is not his problem and that he's fought alongside them in many battles. And this just happens to be the Jabhat al-Nusra faction. So I just wanted to say that while ISIS is barbaric, we shouldn't forget about the barbarism of the other rebel groups which are sold to us as moderates.
And again, most people in the government are not evil, so all this confusion is designed to confuse the military, the police, everybody. We're here decompartmentalizing this, and we've shown years beforehand we know what we're talking about right now. We are right about this.
And we have been for a long time, I think.
What's coming next? What do you think's what's the next big shoe to drop in the Middle East?
I think that the idea for the Middle East is to keep them on a slow burn and keep the bloodshed going as long as possible and hopefully get some divided states. I think that with Ukraine and the world and where everything is going, I'm sorry, did I jump ahead? Did you
go ahead. Yeah, let's talk about Ukraine.
Well, I wanted to say, at the end of the Cold War, one of the deals that went about before Warsaw was disbanded was that Ukraine would sort of stay a neutral ground that wouldn't be put into the NATO camp. Now, whilst Warsaw, the USSR's brand of NATO, was disbanded, NATO remains alive and well, and NATO's objective was to isolate Russia. And I believe that what's happening in Ukraine now follows what happened between the Georgia-Russian war only a few years ago and what's happening in Syria as well, is to continue basically to restart the Cold War and to continue to surround and isolate Russia. And that's heading towards dangerous ground. What happened in Maidan was basically a colored revolution, whether or not the government that was overthrown was an oligarchy. It was democratically elected, but whether or not, the governments in Ukraine were an oligarchy, which I'm sure they were, a lot of what happened was another oligarch was put into power. But in the meantime, they created so much division and problems between the people and disenfranchised the Russian speakers. So it is a direct result of this colored revolution we're seeing happen in Ukraine now. And it just goes to show you that even if the Syrian president had stepped down at the start of 2011, it wouldn't have prevented a civil war. It would have perhaps accelerated the Balkanization and the division of Syria.
Well, that's right. And again, it's the very same proxy war they're starting in Ukraine that they've started in Syria over the last almost 4 years. And what's wild about this is when you're just even barely paying attention, it's all in slow motion clear. It's all admitted. But on our news, it's like, bad man Putin ordered plane shot down. He mean. We need to hurt him. And Putin mean. Putin bad.
Putin evil, and he's the brand new dictator. And
yeah, Putin's missile. Oh, he's so like he was there launching the missile himself when it's hiding in plain view. Why was a commercial airliner of the exact same make and model of the other missing one. I mean, this just gets a little too weird. It's basically impossible, folks, in my view, statistically, to fly through a restricted airspace area. And I had all these air traffic controllers, you name it, call in, and they said, yes, you're right. Just no one is allowed to fly in there. It's a huge area. And they fly right through it when they shot down another plane there the day before. So statistically, I think the Russians probably did shoot it down. But the issue is that they flew it through there. And we had an air traffic controller on earlier saying this will be the equivalent of in Vietnam flying a passenger jet over Hanoi, over North Vietnam, and then freaking out saying, they shot down a passenger liner. Well, you would ask, why did you fly a plane through a war zone? Whoever ordered it to fly through there is who did it, basically.
I think it's very, very strange that nobody is able to fly over Syrian airspace, where it was like that for many years, where the U.S. advised, or the Civil Aviation Authority advised airliners not to fly over Syrian airspace, but somehow it was okay to fly over Ukrainian airspace. And that's because, you know, the responsibility is not over on their heads. So I think that, you know, especially in that area where the responsibility lies, you know, to just say it's Putin, it's basically just such bias that we've been seeing in the media right now. Even I laugh because I also recall during the Winter Olympics, the media against the Winter Olympics was so strong because it was held in Russia, and I believe there was some hashtag like Putin fail or Russia fail or something along those lines. Just the beat up, and it's just like the return of the Cold War, I think.
But this time, we act more like the old Soviets than Russia does. It's really freaking the military out right now. Let's go to some phone calls. We're going to go to, is it Hubu? Habu? I always pronounce his name wrong. He's called before. And then we've got General, George, Mike, David, and others. And David's calling in Spain, so we'll go to him first after we talk to Hubu. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. And as usual, you've been spot on with the Ukrainian matter. But what is really the good thing that you do to humanity is that you've got a worldwide reach, a global reach, and you are doing the rebuttal in real time, which means then it's not going to, something's not going to happen, and then 1 month later we discover it. You are hitting him right in the nose. So good for you and bless you. The last time I called when Syrian Girl was on, I mentioned, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, that it would help the Syrian authority to have Iranian and Hezbollah, and they did enter the fray, and they did turn it around. Here's my question to Syrian Girl. Right now, it seems like ISIS has got a lot of booty, meaning they've got almost, by some estimates, $2 billion, and they've got advanced armaments. If they are pushed out of Iraq, is this going to create almost a monstrous problem for Syria? Because... Oh,
no, that's the plan. They're letting them reconnoiter in Iraq and then get more weapons and then go back into Syria. This is clearly a regrouping either way. If they can't take Iraq, that's okay, because they can then regroup and smash back into Syria. Syrian Girl, your take on Habu's great question.
That's a really, really interesting point. Would, you know, running away from Iraq and into Syria, it could also create problems for Syria. But at the same time, I think that ISIS is controlling oil fields in Iraq and in Syria. So it's sort of they're feeding each other. ISIS in Iraq is propping up ISIS in Syria and vice versa. So if we can get rid of them in Iraq, maybe it actually would be beneficial for Syria and vice versa. I think that it's important for Iraq and Syria to coordinate attacks against ISIS together. And indeed, they are sitting on a lot of booty. They have taken a lot of oil fields. But I think in order for them to have access to all of those oil fields and all of those weaponry and to achieve these military gains, they would have had to have had a strong backer and a lot of money coming in from a state for them to achieve this.
All right, sir. Good to hear from you. Thank you. Let's talk to David in Spain. Go ahead.
Hi. Alex, Syrian Girl. Hi, my name's David. I'm calling from Spain, from Europe. I I was just listening to the radio show. I was listing a series of countries: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Russia, China, even ISIS. And what I understand is that predominantly Iraq was Saddam was a friend of the West, was funded and put in power by the West. Gaddafi was the same. I understand that, and this is a question for you, Syria Girl, but I understand that Assad had links to the West and was at one point a great friend of the West. We know, because you've been speaking about it earlier, Alex, that back in the 20th century, the West got involved with the Russian situation via the Rothschilds at some point. We know that Kissinger's been doing deals with China, and it's incredible. And I disagree with you, though, Alex, because you say we're heading off to war. I don't think we are, not yet, because the Russians and the Chinese aren't powerful enough to have a good old bash at it, right? And they need to have better weapons, better military, better naval, and it's my belief that it's the West who are selling them all that equipment and training, etc., just as they do with ISIS, and just as we know.
Well, when I say we're marching off to war, just to be clear, there's already a bunch of wars breaking out in Africa, in Syria, all over the Middle East, in Ukraine. We're just here, or you're in Spain. I mean, you've had riots in the streets off and on. Look what's happening there. So I think we're both right. But when I say nuclear war, I'm saying that card is in the deck. And it could happen if we don't worry about it and talk about it and think about it.
Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.
Let's go back to Syrian Girl. David, I got to jump on to other people, but Syrian Girl, you want to comment on what he just said?
I just wanted to correct some of the comments, such as Russia and China are buying weapons from the US. I don't believe that that's true. I think China is still buying from Russia. I think the Russians might be buying microchips, though, from a French company called Thales, because the US is still the best at microchips. But I also wanted to correct about Assad being a friend of the West. Bashar al-Assad was actually, this current president, was being sort of, the West tried to seduce him in 2008.
They set up Gaddafi, too. He invested all their money, worked with them, let all their ops in, they set him up. And the same thing with Assad. He was trying to work with them while they got their people in place.
But Assad wouldn't play the same ball game. I mean, Gaddafi decided to disarm himself of chemical weapons, but Assad in 2004, they asked him to disarm his chemical weapons in exchange for peace. He said, you know what, I'll disarm when the entire Middle East disarms of WMDs. That was proposed to the United Nations. Of course, the US vetoed the proposal, and we ended up...
Yeah, you got to love how this moral high ground where the West has all these weapons that nobody else can have weapons, even if they've never used them. It's like 9/11 happens and we blame Saddam. It's just I mean, why not attack Australia or the North Pole? I mean, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
Absolutely. It's all part of the agenda to just disarm them of these weapons. And I wanted to agree with you, though, that we are already in a war. And we are already heading towards a threat of war, and it's like sticking your head in the sand if you don't examine the possibility of there being a war, let's say, where the West is involved.
Sure.
Because that's really what it means.
Well, look, they're not building giant bunkers for the elite everywhere, and the elite aren't leaving Israel and other places for no reason. I mean, this is a big deal. But I agree with what David said is going to get worse down the road. I think things will just continue to deteriorate as long as these psychopaths are running things. And again, they hate us here in America, folks. The globalists hate us more than they hate the Syrians. They hate anybody that's sovereign, anybody that's got guns. Let's talk to George in Connecticut. Thanks for holding her on the air.
Hi, Alex. I just have one question from Syrian Girl and a battle plan after I finish with her. One question. I had stayed with some of the very high officials in intelligence at their house, and they had lots of connections with the airlines. Being you're in Australia, and I'm sure you're a little bit familiar with the politics of Malaysia, businesses north of you, where your residence is now, do you think that either they were duped or they were blackmailed, or there might be some sort of connection there? I'm just curious.
Do you mean the airline, maybe somebody wanted to make sure that the airline would go bust? That was one thing that sort of occurred to me.
Well, I mean, here's another deal. They just flew through Syrian airspace the day after the shoot down, where you're not supposed to fly. I mean, they're trying to get those planes shot down.
Seems like it's just bizarre that it just happened to be a Malaysian airline, twice. It's beyond a coincidence. But as to the reason why, I can't at this point make a guess, because it wouldn't be accurate.
Yeah, caller, what was your battle plan point?
The battle plan point, I think we should do something that Amnesty International always does. They sent letters out to various officials trying to either release people or whatever. In this stead, I think we should do the reverse. We should send postcards, only postcards, no World War III, no Lusitania to George Soros.
Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds? Go back to George. What was the finish up of your point? What do we put on these postcards? No World War III and send them to Soros?
Yes, no World War III, no Lusitania II. Send it to his weekend getaway at Southampton. It's 550 Old Town Road, Southampton 11968, or his home address. It's in Katona, New York 136 Cantito, Cantitoe Street. Just that. Postcards from all over the world to show the whole world is fed up with this. Picture postcards so he knows it's from all over the world. I think it'll have a real impact.
Well, I agree with you, and it's funny. I actually know his address because it's been in the news before. That big mansion on that farm he's got, and then right in the middle of the most expensive real estate in that area, and then he's got that place in New York. And this guy's this guy's a Nazi collaborator. And so I don't want any harm to come to him before he gets a trial, but why doesn't he get scooped up by these Nazi hunters like, guys they can't even prove? It's just, I'm so sick of George Soros. It makes me want to throw up. All right, Syrian Girl, what do you think of that idea?
I support the idea, but it's got to be also as well trying to wake up people, because I think that what Amnesty International does and all of those controlled humanitarian NGOs is that it tries to make people active and in the meanwhile brainwash them about these ideas.
Yeah, only be active on their fake causes to attack things. It's well-known Amnesty's been infiltrated and taken over. His point was take their tactic. Yeah. His point was just take the tactic, and we've got to move quick now. Mike in Pennsylvania, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Syrian Girl. Quick question for you. Kind of off the politics part of this. From your area of the world over there, I've always wondered this, being an American, always living in America, not traveling outside of America much. What do people think of Americans in general?
Ooh, that's a great question. Got to jump, but that's an excellent question. What do people think of the average American?
Well, in Australia or in the Middle East?
Both.
Both. Well, what I specifically think about Americans, just putting it out there, is I believe the vast majority of them actually want to do good. And unfortunately, a lot of them have been brainwashed and controlled. But I find they're very, very easy to wake up, in fact, and very open-minded. But in Australia, I suppose there is this perception that the U.S. is an ignorant place. They don't really know what's going on, and basically they want to create these wars, and they don't know geography.
Sounds like they know what they're talking about in Australia. I love my country, but I mean, we do statistically have the most uninformed morons on the planet, and I'm just saying that so we can turn it around. Only the military and the police seem to be awake. That's because they kind of live in the real world. We're in a lot of trouble, folks. That's all I can say. General in Texas, last caller. Sorry to everybody else. A quick question or comment for Mimi.
Both. I have the answer. We are about to take victory right now. I can't believe them all. All right, real quick, Alex. It's gonna be. I'm trying to get this out in 2 minutes, but if possible, if we can speak.
No, only got about a minute. Go. We gotta go.
On the inside, we have this feeling called anxiety, butterflies in your stomach, nervousness, depression. We all have to get rid of it now. This is faith and this is love. Now, the reason why I say this is love, this is the piece that'll bring us all together, that'll energize the info war, that'll get us from thinking of game plans like the guy just had to executing game plans. And it's one last piece I got to leave out there for everybody. Go to YouTube and check out Day of Glory 7773, DAYGLORY 7773. Going to be 7 videos on there. The main video that you need to everybody has to look at is the gospel quoted by Jesus Christ, where I read every single passage from Matthew to John where Jesus tells you how to gain eternal life.
Well, good job. Good job for getting involved in doing that. Syrian girl, sorry to rush you there at the end. Thanks for coming and joining us. Thanks for staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning in Australia, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot for having me, and my best wishes to you and the American people.
You too. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Edward Group. Today I'd like to talk about the war on women. You've experienced and heard about the benefits of super male vitality. Now, the new formula has arrived. Introducing the new Super Female Vitality. I have specifically designed this formula to help the body naturally regulate itself without the use of artificial hormones. Key ingredients chosen from the highest quality sources. Each of these ingredients works synergistically with the female body in order to maximize overall vitality. You've heard the reviews and the feedback on how the original Super Male Vitality has revitalized relationships. Now, both the man and the woman can have the revitalization in their own bodies with Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality. Secure your Super Female Vitality today from our limited stock at InfoWarsLife.com.